Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about that crazy game down there in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. Definitely the game of the year, one of the best plays that I've ever seen from Ryan Williams to finish that one off. So incredible. Cannot wait to see possibly those teams again, but cannot wait to see a number of other matchups coming up. Georgia against Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, which is on the same weekend. So a lot coming forward for those two teams, but remarkable game down there in Tuscaloosa. Now let's get into a couple other wins because Penn State, Notre Dame got big-time top 25 wins this past weekend, and they did it in kind of interesting fashion, especially Penn State, because this was not the normal Penn State, at least the one that we've become accustomed to early on in this season. It was a little bit back to kind of factory settings, if you will. It was a lot of running the ball, not a ton of explosive, just kind of working your way down the field and getting a pretty ugly win at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, it is a win. So huge for them, absolutely something that you got to be able to win multiple ways. And knowing that they can win running the ball and playing defense is a huge feather in your cap. There's no doubt about that. So Illinois did not play their game. They kind of got their game taken from them. It was nothing on the ground, multiple turnovers, lost time of possession, everything that you need to do if you're Illinois to win this game, they just weren't able to do. And it's definitely something that you kind of felt was coming at some point for Illinois. I think they're a really, really good team, and I think they're going to be dangerous going forward. They got Michigan in a couple of weeks, so that'll be something to watch. But when you watch this team, I think everyone understood that once they faced Penn State, once they faced Michigan, once they faced Ohio State, it was going to be an uphill battle, and that's exactly what it was. The physicality was a little bit different than it had been the first couple of weeks for Illinois. So this was the first hurdle for Penn State, definitely a huge one to get over. At Ohio State and at USC and Ohio State, are definitely the remaining ones, and they're plenty big. So you're going to have to play better football than you did on Saturday, no doubt about that, but got a big-time win, move forward, and then handle all the rest of it later. How did they win this one, though? The two-headed monster came back out, and frankly, I'd been waiting for this a little bit this season. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton are just downright special. They combined for 34 carries, 196 yards, 2 touchdowns. These guys were absolutely incredible, and frankly, they were the reason that they won this game. If they were not out on that field, it probably would be 7-7, and no one would be able to get in the end zone, and we might still be playing right now, because these offenses did not get going by any means. But the running backs for Notre Dame did save them and got them just a huge, huge win at home. And then you had no running room for Illinois, which obviously was a huge part of their game, has been the entire year, and it was D-line domination. They pushed around a really solid unit for Illinois for the entirety of the game, 32 carries, 34 yards. The only positive rusher was Caden Fagan, and he only had 13 carries because of the flow of the game, because of how hard it was to get some of these guys carries throughout this game. And then you had the pass rush for Penn State. It was absolutely incredible. Abdul Carter made a couple of mental errors early on in this game, a couple of offsides, things like that, but 7 tackles, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, plenty makes up for that. He was absolutely remarkable, definitely one of those guys that if he can continue to come on, they have every chance to beat Ohio State. They have every chance to go to the playoff and possibly make a run there. He's so special and definitely one of those guys to watch. And then as a total, you got 7 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. Just absolute domination from this pass rush, and something that Penn State's likely going to need a lot going forward. So where do they go from here? I think for Illinois, you just took their first punch in this 4-game stretch, and frankly, it's not going to get a ton easier. You do have a bye week, and then you get Purdue, so should be able to get right a little bit there. Then it's Michigan and Oregon, so it's a huge stretch. If they can possibly go 2-for-1 in the next little bit, if they can beat Michigan somehow or somehow beat Oregon, I don't know. They're still a team that's very much in this race, and it's going to be really fun to watch them go over the next couple of weeks. A little bit worried about this team in terms of the line of scrimmage. If they're going to get rolled over on the defensive line the way that they did in this game, Michigan's going to tear them apart, Oregon's going to tear them apart, but plenty still ahead for this team and definitely plenty to figure out. Penn State, this is huge. I understand this is not the score that you wanted. I understand this is not the way that you wanted to win this game. This is a game that they lose in the past. This is a game that sneaks up on them and absolutely kind of torpedoes their season in a number of different ways because of how lackadaisical they have been in some of these games in the past. They were able to handle this. That is what you take and you run with it. Don't worry about all of the other stuff. Don't worry about the nuances of this game that weren't great. I'm not going to lie to you by any means, but at the end of the day, you got a big-time win. You got to go UCLA next, coming to you, thank goodness, and then you got to go out to LA to play USC. That's the one where you get in the fast track for a CFP berth, but plenty to figure out before you get there, that is for sure. And then you got Louisville, Notre Dame, and this one was really interesting. Really impressive win for Notre Dame in my mind. I think they found some openings in the pass game, which was absolutely huge. The defense is flying around as they do. They're really remarkable, and it sets up a great matchup possibly at the end of the year that could just be a CFP on the line for them against USC. And then you had a really, really awesome job for Notre Dame to try to take the air out of Louisville's tires. You had a huge run from Tyler Shuck that was negated by a fumble forced by Jaden Osbury. You had turnover on downs, 5 plays, 21 yards the very next drive, and then for first play touchdown. They did an incredible job of just not letting Louisville really get rolling. They got a couple of big plays, and then Notre Dame would take the ball back. Louisville gets within one score, and then Xavier Watts gets a pick. It was remarkable to watch this team just respond and be able to kind of just, whenever Louisville had a punch, they had a counterpunch. It was really remarkable to watch, and more than anything for Louisville, just too many self-inflicted wounds. It felt like a team that had not been tested yet, and that's exactly what we got. So definitely a lot to figure out. Still plenty in front of them. Definitely can be a player in the ACC, but a tough loss here and plenty to figure out over there at Louisville. How Notre Dame was able to win a balanced offense for the first time this year. And I understand they were able to do it against some lesser opponents, but the reality is they need this throughout the rest of the year. They had 163 through the air, 120 on the ground, only 6 incompletions, 4 yards per carry. It was exactly what you wanted it to be. It's the formula that they're going to have to do going forward, get enough on offense, and then play really, really good defense the entire day. They got plenty on offense in this one. And then build a buffer early. I think there's another thing for Notre Dame that they're going to have to do the rest of the way. Fell down 0-7 early, but then 21 straight points and never looked back. And it's really because this run game is going to be good. It's going to be dangerous with Riley Leonard, with Jeremiah Love, with Jadarian Price. All of these guys are going to be really hard to stop. If Notre Dame gets up by 2 scores in pretty much any game this year, you can almost book them as a winner because it's absolutely huge for this team and they can just run the ball all over you to finish out that game. And then finally, bend but don't break. This was probably the biggest thing in this game. There were a number of different chances that Louisville had to possibly put points on the board and make this more interesting. I mean, they had drives of 48 yards, 60 yards, 45 yards, and a couple more over 30. They ended in an INT, a turnover on downs, and a punt. They absolutely have to do better than that, and a huge thing for Notre Dame because there were a number of different chances Louisville had to really kick this door down and possibly make this a real game, and Notre Dame just had an answer. Really remarkable stuff from this team, and where they go from here, I think, for Louisville, you're still in okay shape. I understand this one's a tough loss, but the reality is you start conference play next week. You have no in-conference losses with the win over Georgia Tech last week. You play a good SMU team that's surging right now. Then you go to Virginia before the big one against Miami. If you can split between Miami and Clemson the rest of the year, you're very much in the conversation for an ACC title berth. You'll knock out one of those teams and you'll be able to join the other, possibly in the ACC title. So still plenty on the table for this team. I think they're still finding themselves. I still think they're trying to figure out who they are offensively and defensively. But at the end of the day, still plenty on the table for this team. Still very, very dangerous downfield. And one of those teams that if Miami or Clemson don't come ready at the very beginning of those games, maybe Louisville's up 14-0 before you know it, and they have a couple of big plays, Ja'Cory Brooks, and things change in a hurry. And then for Notre Dame, this was huge. There were a number of different places that this season can go wrong the rest of the way. This was probably the biggest one before you get to USC, and they were able to get through it. Now, you do have Stanford, you got Georgia Tech and Atlanta, you got Navy and Army who are playing really good football right now, and then you got USC to end the season. I'm not even going to include Florida State because I'm just going to mark that down as a win, and we'll get to them probably tomorrow, honestly, more than anything else. But really huge win for Notre Dame. I think it's one of those things that you just saw what your team can be. You just saw what they can be in offense. You just saw what they absolutely are on defense. You saw what this team has a capability of being, and frankly, if you can bottle that up and you can continue that throughout the rest of the season, there's a number of things that Notre Dame can do. I know that NIU game was really ugly, and I've said with my chest, and I will continue to say it, I think that should eliminate them from the playoffs, but it doesn't. You're very much still in the fight, and you very much can put together a great season the rest of the way and be the 5 seed, be the 6 seed, and be very much in the conversation for a national title. So huge win for this team. I think when you look at the wins from this past weekend, this one might get a little bit lost in the shuffle, but absolutely one that Notre Dame needed, and they got a huge one, no doubt about that. So really impressive wins from these two teams. I think when you look at these games, didn't necessarily beat you over the head, didn't necessarily send a huge statement for either of these teams, but when you can get a top 20 win, you absolutely take it and you run with it. You got plenty to figure out at those two places, but a big win is a big win at the end of the day. So huge for both those teams. I think it's going to be really fun to watch them the rest of the year and see if they can possibly make playoff runs, and maybe they'll just meet in the playoff. Who knows? But let's take our second break here. And when we come back, we got to talk about upsets because we had a huge one down in Oxford. We had another one up, I believe, up in Salt Lake City. I could be wrong about that, actually. And then we had one in Blacksburg that maybe should have been. But we'll get to that right after this, so stick with us.